In this video, I want to show how to export camera tracking data from Blender to After Effects, so that in post-production we can add this groove that is traced in the stone by the actor. But in order to track this groove in After Effects, we need to export the tracking data from Blender, so that we have the same framing and camera movement. This way, the camera moves in After Effects in the same way as it does in Blender. This will allow us to have the same framing that we have in Blender. As a result, when we add the effect of the groove in the stone, it will move the same as in the original video. The first thing I'm going to do is to import the video into Blender. Then, we have to open the motion tracking panel. And from there, we import the image sequence of the video. At this point, we can set the length of the timeline equal to the video. We can also do a prefetch of the footage in order to load in memory the entire sequence. At this point, I'm going to set some camera properties. In this case, we have a sensor size of 23.5 and a focal length of 24 millimeters. Remember to set the frame rate exactly the same as the original video, in this case 25 frames per second. Now we can start tracking individual markers. Go to the Track panel, click the Add button to add a marker, and place it at one of the feature in the video. Place the center point of the marker in the right location. Now we can start tracking this single marker by clicking on this button. As you can see, the marker is being tracked. The marker must be in the same position throughout the duration of the video. Let's go to the beginning of the timeline and take a look at the window that is located on the right. You have to check that the center of the marker does not move throughout the entire sequence of the video. At this point, we can go back and repeat the same process for all the other markers. So, add another marker, for example here, and start tracking with this button. It is important to repeat the same process for the markers on the walls and for those on the floor. We also need to track the features of the other objects we need. In particular, this wooden board that represents the stone on which we need to draw the groove. So, select one of these markers and repeat the tracking process. If, for any reason, the tracking process fails, you have to move to the last frame where tracking was successful. Then, move to the frame where tracking is lost and reposition the marker. Activate the Enable checkbox. Move the marker in the right place. And from here you can proceed with the tracking process. If you notice some displacements, you can manually reposition the marker and continue with the tracking. We can do the same for the other markers, so that we have a large number of tracked features. Remember that, in order to properly trace a planar surface, such as this one, we must have a minimum of 3 markers. And this is the reason why I placed 3 markers on this wooden board. Let's also track the features on this cube which serves as the support of the rock. Of course, we do the tracking of the floor as well. As a last step, we can do the solving of the scene. Open the Solve tab and click on the Solve Camera Motion button. Blender creates the movement of the camera based on the movement of the individual markers. Here we have the solve error. If this value is less than 1, it means that the calculation was correctly done. In this case it is 0.33, so the solving is fine. Now we need to create a basic 3D scene. We can do this by clicking the Setup Tracking Scene button. Blender automatically creates a cube and a ground plane that follow the movement of the camera. But these elements may not be correctly placed. We must define the floor of the scene. Select 3 markers that are located on the floor and click on the Floor button. These markers are used to position the floor. We can also define an origin of the 3D world. Select one of the markers and click on the Set Origin button. The 3D objects are positioned correctly. We can see this by opening the 3D scene. Blender also created the camera. If we move to the camera view, we have the scene framed as in the original video. We can also turn on the marker view. Open the Overlay tab and activate the visualization of the motion tracking data. Let's hide the floor for the moment. The virtual markers perfectly follow the movement of the real ones. The next step is to create the virtual scene. In this case, the cave and the rock that is used to carve the groove. This is the simple virtual scene I made. This object represents the cave, and this is the rock on which we are going to draw the groove. As you can see, the front of the stone is positioned to match these markers. I also added a light, similarly to the one in the original video. Let's move to the camera view. If we hide the cave, we have the original video as the background. This is the final scene that we need to export. We'll use it later for compositing with the real actor. Now we need to export the camera from Blender to After Effects. In order to do this, we need to use a free plugin. But it is no longer available in the latest versions of Blender. Indeed, if we open the Plugins panel, we don't find the Export to After Effects add-on. So we have to install it manually. The link is in the description. Click on Raw File, and then on Download. Let's go back to Blender to install and activate the plugin. Now, if we go to File Export, we have the option to export to After Effects. In this way, we can then export the camera. Select File Export, and then Adobe After Effects. Select Active Camera and Animation, and give it a name. Now let's open After Effects and create a new project. I'm going to run the script we just exported from Blender. So, let's click on Run Script File. Assign a name to the composition you want to create. After Effects automatically creates a composition with all the markers in the camera we exported from Blender. Indeed, if we move forward in the timeline, the markers move correctly. We also need to verify the camera properties. They have to be the same as in Blender. So, double-click on the camera layer to open the related settings. The camera must have a film size of 23.5 and a focal length of 24 millimeters. Now we can import the original footage as well. We can add the video as background to check the position of the markers. They move like the markers in the video. We also need to import the virtual sequence we created in Blender. Now I'm going to finalize the compositing with the green screen video. The first thing to do is to apply the key light effect. Sample the green of the backdrop so that it becomes transparent. I also added some masks in order better to isolate the subject. Finally, I made the compositing between the actor and the virtual world. Now we need to add the groove in the stone. I'm going to create a new composition, which will contain the animation of the groove in the rock. Then, I added this composition to the one that contains the camera and markers that we imported from Blender. However, we need to position it correctly in 3D space. Specifically, I want to place the composition at the same point as this marker, which represents the position of the virtual plane. Select the marker and press the P key to display its position property. Copy the position by pressing Ctrl or Command C. Then, select the groove layer and activate the 3D layer button. Finally, paste the position values by pressing Ctrl or Command V. The layer that contains the groove animation is correctly placed in the 3D space. Now I'm going to add another viewport in order to see both the final animation and the groove one. Then I'm going to animate the furrow lines. So I created some shape layers. You can create the line animation with the trim path effect. We also need to resize the furrow composition and position it correctly along the X and Y axis. Be careful not to move it along the Z axis, otherwise it will miss the alignment with the rock. At this point, we need to make the animation of the lines, following the same movement of the hand. Of course, the animation of the groove have to be placed behind the hand. So, in the final compositing, I'm going to place the groove behind the chroma key footage. As a last step, we can add a color correction. And this is the final result.